Greetings. Welcome to Confession Corner, where we deep dive into the real stories that are hidden in the depths. If you're new here, hit that like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe. We post 3 to 4 times a week. Ready to dive in? Let's get started. Paranormal believers of Reddit, what made you believe? My husband and I live in a 100-year-old house. It's always been a little creepy, like hearing people talking in another room and going in, and there's no one there. But a couple of years ago, we had 2 really good hauntings that totally convinced me the paranormal is real. The first thing that happened was when I was sleeping on the living room floor in front of the TV. I'd hurt my back and was trying to get it to unkink. I woke up at 4 a.m. and I heard the mantle clock chime 4. I'm sure I was awake because I watched TV for a few minutes. Then, I heard my husband walk into the room behind me. He picked up the comforter and spooned behind me, his arm thrown over my waist. After a couple of minutes, it was like his arm weighed a ton, and he was throwing a lot of heat. Just about then, I heard my husband start snoring from the bedroom. I was like, shit, freaking terrified. So I counted to 3, threw the cover off, and ran. Woke him up and we looked. There was no one else in the house, but I know something was there. The second time, we were both asleep in the bedroom. At about 4 a.m. again, my husband says he woke up to hear 2 little girls talking. He could hear them playing jacks, the ball bouncing, the metal sound of the jacks on the wood floors. Then, one of the little girls says to the other, "Watch this." And she goes, "Mama, Mama." And I, still asleep, sat straight up and said, "What, baby?" Once a mom, always a mom, right? The little girls laughed because it worked, so he shook me awake, and I looked at him. Then at the doorway, where the little girls were, they looked real, except their outlines were wavering, and they were almost black and white. They saw us both looking and laughed. Then, the older girl grabbed the littler one's hand, and they walked right through the bedroom wall and disappeared. When I was younger, my mom used to invite random neighborhood children over for dinner and parties so they could eat. At my sister's birthday party, everyone was outside getting ready to hit the pinata. My father noticed a girl sitting inside staring out the window at us. We have a large window beside front door. He told me to go inside and ask her to come out and join the party. I ran up the walkway, looking at her through the window as I went toward the door, and then as soon as I passed through the doorway, losing sight of her for a few seconds, she was gone. My dad thought she had fallen. There's a couch in front of the window, so he thought she fell on the couch. I looked around for her, but couldn't find her, so I told my dad. He helped me look for her, but still nothing. No one else saw her except me and my dad. My mom said she didn't recall inviting any girls with our description of her. We forgot about it until some years later, though. I don't really know exactly how many. My dad and I were sitting in the living room watching TV. From my dad's armchair, you can see into the kitchen a little bit. Me and my dad were talking about the show we were watching when he suddenly got quiet. He said my name and motioned for me to come over to him. He told me to look at the microwave. I saw that girl's reflection in the microwave, exactly the same as before. I ran into the kitchen and my dad followed, but again, no one was there. We were both pretty spooked, so we went out for ice cream until my mom came home. I thought it was a neighborhood kid playing a prank on us the first time, but seeing her the second time unchanged in our kitchen many years later made me start believing in ghosts. My boyfriend, 2-month-old daughter, and I lived in Port Perry, Ontario, in a 2-bedroom apartment. The people that used to live in our unit moved into the 3-bedroom unit right next to us. I started noticing weird things like lights being on when I had them off, cupboards open, things moved or flipped upside down. Now I'm pretty anal about my lights being off because hydro in Ontario is high, and anal about my place being clean, but I chalked it up to postpartum exhaustion and hormones. Until I left for the day with my friend, and when I came home, all of my lights were on, all of my cupboards were open, and all of my doors were open. First I thought, okay, well, my boyfriend is home. Nope, he was at work. When I called him, he automatically assumed that it was the neighbors. They did kind of look like junkies, coming into our place, and they might have a key. And I thought, well, what about the landlord? So me trying to be clever, set up my laptop camera to look at the door, and before I left, put baby powder down on the ground to see if there were any footprints while I was gone. I left for about an hour to grab groceries, and when I came back, no marks on the baby powder, and camera still rolling. Nothing looked out of place, no lights or anything on. Everything looked normal. I watched the video and nothing moved, but there was a smash kind of sound, but that could have been anything. I didn't put any thought into it since there were a lot of units, and we lived on a main street. So I put my daughter for a nap, got up to go to the bathroom, and oh my God, all of my makeup, face wash, soap, and counter stuff was everywhere. Like a tornado ripped through my bathroom. I tripped the fuck out like either there is some scary shit happening or someone was just in here. After that, I became like high alert and made sure I always shut lights off, closed everything, and sure as shit, man, 2 days after that, I was playing COD in my living room. Daughter sleeping, and I hear like a clinging sound coming from my kitchen. Turn the lights on, and one of my cupboards is open, and 3 glasses sitting on the counter. BTW, I never use glass cups, never liked them. So needless to say, I was fucking freaked out. I ended up talking to the neighbor about whether or not she had issues with the landlord entering the unit, and she gave me this weird look and asked why. Things out of place. Basically, she was dealing with the same exact thing. She contacted the landlord about it, and he laughed, saying it's always been like that, and there is a haunted restaurant next door. Now, the haunted restaurant is real, and it's called Jester's Court. I lived there for about 4 more months after that, and constantly had similar issues with zero explanation. So yeah, I have never been able to explain what it was. My husband's grandpa was a sweet, very nice man. I did not have a grandfather growing up, so I pretty much just viewed him as mine. When we found out we were having our second child, a boy, we knew we wanted to name him after him. We thought we would surprise him. When I was 7 months pregnant, his diabetes took a turn for the worse, and he had to have 2 toes amputated. We mentally prepared for the realization that this sprightly 90-year-old man probably would lose most of his mobility, and a lot of his personality would go with it. He was always very determined and was still, up to this point, driving himself to his lake house 5 hours away and hanging his own Christmas lights. We took weekly trips over to visit with him with our children. He seemed sad. When our son was 6 months old, my husband's grandpa was admitted into the hospital. He was very weak and tired. On a Thursday afternoon, his remaining children, his grandchildren and their wives, and his great-grandchildren gathered into his small ICU room, where he told us he had asked his doctor to turn off his ventilator and he was ready to go. He told each of us goodbye separately. He told me to continue to be a great mother and that he loved my family deeply. He then told me about a train set that he had when he was a kid. He kept the train set under his bed at his home. He said that it was an antique, just like him, and the box was tattered, so to be careful with it. He wanted my son to have it. I promised him I would take care of his request. After the doctor returned, we sat together quietly with him as a family. He passed after a few hours and a lot of tears shed. Fast forward to last year. My son is now 2 at this point. We are watching the same Disney movie for the 4th time that day. It is time to wind down. I ask him to lay with me on the couch and relax before we go upstairs to bed. He typically does not fight me on this, as he is a humongous snuggler. He runs into the kitchen. I give it a couple of minutes, figuring he is grabbing a toy off the table that just cannot possibly spend the night alone. It finally hits me. There is silence. I yell for him. He runs in and says to me, "Papa Lyle is in the kitchen." My husband's eyes dart to me from his phone. I said, "What did you say, Bubba?" He very clearly says to me, "Papa Lyle is in there. It's dark." I am now up and going to the kitchen. I vaguely could tell my son had something in his hand, but wasn't registering that due to the shock of hearing him say what he said. I said to him, "Where is Papa Lyle?" He pointed to our kitchen table. On the kitchen table were all of my son's toy trains, not from the train set, sat in a line on the table. I know for a fact my son did not do this because we had a late supper and those trains were pushed from the middle of the table to the end to make room for our plates, and he had then taken a bath and played in the living room up to this point. My son then turned to me and said, "Mama, Papa Lyle's trains." Obviously, we got the antique train set out the next day. I was 15 and home alone all summer. My parents were at work and my sister at a babysitter's. One morning that summer, I was watching TV in the living room and wanted a snack. So I walked to the fridge and seen a little girl with blonde hair and a red dress sitting at the breakfast bar facing away from me towards the back of the kitchen. I just thought it was my sister. It was only when I stepped over the doorway, back into the living room, did it dawn on me that my sister wasn't home. I peeked into the kitchen and no one was there. Around 1 p.m., my mom comes home for lunch as she works a 5-minute drive away. Before I get the chance to say anything, she says that she had a really weird dream the night before. In her dream, she was lying awake in bed, and at the foot of the bed was a little blonde girl wearing a red dress facing away from her. Neither of us have ever seen the little girl again, but I definitely now believe in the paranormal. I used to work night shift in group homes for the mentally disabled or severely mentally ill. At one house I worked at, there was constant scratching coming from the walls. I figured it was just squirrels, but now I'm not too sure. We had set a lot of traps and never caught anything. But this isn't what made me a believer. What happened was one night I was watching TV in the living room after all the residents had fallen asleep. Around 3 a.m., the doorbell starts ringing like someone is frantically pushing it. I get up and go to the door, but when I got there and opened it, nobody was there. Now, the 3 things you need to know about the entryway. First is that the entry is into the living room, and I can see it from the couch. Second is that the front door has a very large window on it, 2/3 plus of the door is window. And lastly, that the walkway to the front doorknob, a 20 to 30 foot corridor that has 12-foot brick wall on either side. So in order to ding-dong ditch, you'd have to run back that entire length to be able to duck around a corner. I figured I was being pranked by one of our more mischievous residents, so I went and checked on them all, and they were all fast asleep. As soon as I finished shutting the last resident's door, the doorbell started frantically ringing again. I rushed to the door again, only to find nobody there. This time I was determined to catch them, so I turned all the lights off except the TV and hid right beside the door so I'd be able to immediately open it when they came back. After 20 minutes, the doorbell started going insane again. I jumped out and quickly turned on the walkway lights and looked out the window, but nobody was there. I then opened the door thinking maybe they were hiding to the side of the door like I had. After seeing nobody there, my stomach dropped and I got a feeling of dread. I slowly started closing the door. As soon as the door was almost closed all the way, the doorbell started going nuts again and stayed that way for at least 15 minutes before stopping again. It was almost as if whatever it was took great pleasure in mocking and taunting me. I locked the door and ran my ass to the couch after turning on all the lights I could. Another disturbing thing about this is it seemed to read my mind. Whenever I got the urge to go outside and smoke, it would start with the doorbell again. It's like it didn't want me to forget it's there, and a threat. Looking back, I'm pretty sure it was a poltergeist. That place was rife with bad energy, as most group homes are. A lot of suffering and raw emotions happen at those places. It also didn't help we had a resident there who had literally gone insane after watching his parents get murdered in front of him, and a medium-low functioning schizophrenic with what I've confirmed of at least 8 distinct people talking to him in his head. Both of these residents are constantly having shit knocked off their shelves, walls in the middle of the night, and it's super common for them to be yelling at people that aren't there to shut up in the middle of the night. I used to think it was just mental illness, but now I'm not too sure. Also, years later, I worked in a facility where someone hung themselves in the bathroom. The bathroom door slams shut in the middle of the night if you try to leave it propped open, which is company policy. I used to work for a couple haunted hotel properties in a town where gold was found. It brought all sorts of history to the small town, and all the original buildings were still there. I never believed until then. Certain staff members refused to enter one house alone. I was cleaning the house on my own, waiting for my coworker to arrive. Upon entering one room in particular, I felt off. That was the first time I saw a shadow person. There was also one room that, without fail, a guest would check out and say that the closet door opened and slammed shut forcefully. I had to bring extra pillows and blankets to that room prior to the guests showing up. They called me maybe around 8 p.m. to request it. I locked the front desk and went to the property. Wouldn't you know it, the exact thing happened to me as I was leaving the room. Other things include people seeing a woman and a child looking out from the windows. I felt dizzy in the kitchen storage area and absent-mindedly told a maintenance worker. He said, "In the kitchen?" "Yeah." A previous owner's son hung himself in the basement. Ever since we sealed it off, stuff stopped happening. "But you'll get dizzy," in a cheery way that made me wonder if he had actually just told me his grandma's banana bread recipe, and I was the crazy one. Oh, one room. Anytime a guest left, you'd find the alarm clock in the same spot under the bed without fail. Let's see. Oh, once we locked all the doorstairs rooms and prepared to leave. My coworker forgot something and walked back in. Came back, pale as a ghost, pun intended, saying all the doors were swung open and unlocked, and all the lights that had been turned off were now on. It was also common to turn off all the lights in the house. So many times, we'd be pulling out of the driveway, look back, and everything was turned back on. That particular house was eventually sold to a lady and her kids. She once came in saying her kid was always talking to a doorway and would become fixated on it. I hadn't heard that one, but she understood when I tried to gently let her know our history with it. Another house had a nice little common sitting area downstairs. Still had the original flooring, with scuffs from cowboy boot spurs. It was common to hear boots going up and down the stairs while no one else was around. I started to be curious about paranormal stuff when I was a teenager. I experimented with tarot, pendulums, sigil magic, Ouija boards. Well, some of these things worked, but I never really believed that there was something really paranormal about them, because there was no real proof. At the age of 15 to 16, I read this old book, Voice Transmissions with the Deceased, by Friedrich Jurgensen from 1989. It's a book about the electronic voice phenomenon. I really wanted to try it out. I only had a PC and a normal microphone, but I sat down one evening and just started to record. I did not ask any questions, just let it record for 1 hour and then listen to it with my headphones, doing other stuff in the meantime. I did 2 or 3 sessions. There were some unusual sounds and maybe some whispering and singing, but it was barely to hear, and maybe it was myself, so I did not take it seriously. Then the second evening, maybe it was the second session, and I listened to my recording. I hear myself talking on it because I was searching for a CD at this moment, saying something like, "Why should it be in this closet?" You can clearly hear that I am far away from the microphone. Then there is this voice, so clear and loud, like the person is speaking directly into the microphone. It sounds like a girl or young female, and she clearly has an accent. She is rolling the R. It's short, and she speaks very fast, but she says, "Aus Geräte." I'm German. It is not a correct sentence, but I would translate it to "devices off." God, I was so shocked. I showed it to my family, and we all agreed that we did not know this voice. This is still a mystery to me, but I stopped recording after this because it was too creepy for me at that time, and I interpreted her words to turn everything off. That's it for today's confessions. Hope you enjoyed. Like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep going. Thanks, and see you in the next one. Toodles.